Outside, it's time to go outside into the big bright world. Let's go now. Outside, outside. Wait a minute. What? No. What? No. No. What? No. Come inside. Join me. Inside. Inside the delightful and disturbing realm of my imagination. Mmm. From your eyeballs into my eyeballs. From your ears into my mouth, down inside my brain. That was a very disturbing way to start off today's stream, but that's you're just rolling the dice whenever you sit down with the Dungeon Bastard, ladies and gentlemen. Hey everyone, I'm Tom Lommel. I'm your host. Welcome to Disorganized Play, a DM advice show, a forum for me to muse upon my thoughts when it comes to the realms of role-playing, a freeform exploration of gaming, as it were, in the tabletop sphere. So, welcome, thank you for joining me. I'm so glad to see you here, and we have kind of a day today planned. It was a bit of a frustrating night last night. If you tuned in or tried to tune in and nobody could move. So that was a problem. That was not good, and I apologize to everyone, but it seems like it was a internet-wide service provider problem and not something that was going on with the studio. Let's hope. Let's hope. We didn't really have too many issues over at the old place. But new place, you're always trying to figure out, like, what are the tricks? So, that's the deal. That's the dealio. Today, it's just me. Yes. All right. So today we are going to talk about a recap of last night's session. We're going to talk a little bit about dungeon crafting. We're going to talk about the best laid plans, which is what we had on Tuesday, and now here we are on Thursday, talking about what actually happened. Right? So that is where we're at. We may have some time to do some Q&A if you are so inclined to enjoy the Q and the A. If you have questions for me about my game, about your game, about whatever, I'm happy to entertain them. Generally, I like to answer questions. Generally, I like to answer all questions. So let's make sure that we get that perfunctory disclaimer tightened down to what is most accurate. Generally, I like to answer all types of questions. You might be inclined to ask me role-playing game questions. So that is mostly my area of expertise. That and improvisation and acting and maybe crafting a career in Hollywood. So that's where we're at. All right. So let's take a brief tour of what happened last night, where things were at, and my responses or interpretations thereof. Yes? Obviously, the big event was we had just gotten to the climactic fight, and our internet crapped out on us. So we decided at that point, it was like 10:15, and we had a long enough outage that we had to kill that session. Okay? I was a little bit relieved. It was my personal reaction to that. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, and I wasn't sure that we were going to have the time to give it its due that it deserved. And it felt like the players weren't quite ramped up on the drama of the situation. Once again, I think this is one of those circumstances where I throw a big combat at them and it kind of comes out of the blue and they're not really sure where it's coming from, right? And they're kind of like, well, I guess we'll have a big fight. I don't know. So those were the big events, right? That was the big event from last night. And just to be clear, like I said, I was actually relieved. I was happy that we did what we did, that we kind of switched into fireside chat mode, had a little bit of casual conversation about the game and how it was going. we'll get to that because I thought that was very interesting. Um, but yeah, I wasn't mega disappointed. It was a little frustrating to have put so much effort into preparing for that particular session, and then we weren't shifting gears into it properly. Now, just to pick things back up chronologically from the beginning, I think we had an issue from the start of the session. So I think if you go back and watch the stream, it's pretty clear everybody was like in kind of a goofy mood and wanted to kind of more have fun, and I was certainly anticipating more of like a dramatic build to the climactic showdown, and their headspace wasn't there, right? That was not where the players were. And that's fine. So it panned out for the best that we didn't really get there. I think now they have a week to kind of chew on it. Maybe we'll come back from vacation and it'll be more settled down. All right. So just to kind of tackle some of the events from last night in the order that they happened. Obviously, we had the kind of like a rough start to like getting the session underway. It really took us an hour to get going. Part of me as the DM is like, I should be hitting the hammer and reining them in more. I will say it's a difficult group to rein in, right? And is that necessary? Is a corollary question. As long as we're not super spinning our wheels, obviously there was some stuff where it's like, we're going to fill some time because Amy had to take an important phone call that was a business call that she couldn't get away from, right? I apologize for the lighting today, too. It's a little weird. So we got off to a slow start. We've all had that session at home, right? That's just, that happens. So part of it is, yeah, you could, as the DM, swing the hammer a little harder and be like, okay, guys, come on, focus. Da, da, da. You have to keep in mind that when you're channeling that energy in a different direction, you're fighting what the natural energy is, right? And that's difficult. It's easier for you to step into the stream and roll along and go, hey, they want to have just this goofy kind of session. And maybe have kind of more of a real weird, loosey-goosey kind of like role-playing session. This is getting ahead of myself, but I would suggest maybe that's the point at which you go, let's have a flashback session. Guys, time out. Let's just take a break from the current storyline. Let's do a whole session that's one time in Neverwinter, right? We'll come back to this idea, but that's something that I think you can take advantage of as you realize what you have prepared is not what they're there for. It's not what they've brought to the table. It's scary, but have some wiggle room for that kind of, if you want to stay within the campaign, right? Now, your biggest difficulty there is when half the party is like, oh, I can't wait for tonight, and half the party is like, look what happened today at work, and I saw this on the internet, and like when they're wet. That's the worst, is when the one part of the group wants to stay on task, and the other part of the group is just there to kind of socialize and have fun. So you have to be able to read your group when you're going to make that kind of call. But think about it. We'll get back to that when we get to best laid plans, right? So the first thing once we started playing that happened was they dicked around into that statue a little bit. That was fine, whatever. That was not a big deal. But there was a key thing that happened in that room or during the recap, right? And if you were paying attention in the book, you'll notice that along the way I've been editing out certain encounters, right? Or making them optional. But if you paid attention with the book last night, I cut a room for sure. Now, I was intending to cut Belloc's study, because you go from the Dragon Shrine into the Dragon Library, into the hallway, and then down the hallway, and I was like, let's just go directly to the Grove. Why do we have all these weird encounters, etc.? We don't need these kind of like guards at the gate type of encounters and this rolling thunder type of thing. I don't really. That's not what I wanted to present to them. That's fine. But you'll notice that during the recap, if you were listening, Eric specifically called out, like, oh yeah, the way that we get there is we go through these rooms, then we go past this dragon statue that we didn't touch, and then we go down past past his study, and that will lead us to this Twilight Grove place. Okay. Well, paying attention, now I know that he's expecting to encounter that study. I can't cut that. I had cut that in my remix, my edit, but I can't cut that. And that's, if you go back and watch, that's where you see me go from my little sheaf of papers back to the book, because I wanted to make sure I lifted appropriate details from the study, right? Okay, great. So, easy fix. Cut that room. Change it to the study. Simple, easy as pie. They don't know that the next room is supposed to be this disheveled library. Guess what? It's 2 book rooms that are basically 1 hallway apart. That's literally all it is. As you go through this weird underpass, for no reason that it's an underpass, except that to show that the complex has some dimensionality to it. But you literally go from the library to the study. As much as I have ranted and raved about how great library rooms are, and books are this great way to discern, drop information, etc., 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 I don't know that it's valuable to have 2 of them back to back. So I cut one. Easy fix. All right, so we go through the weird hallway. We go down to the study. Now, that area had a lot going on. There was the Gate Grove encounter that they immediately got wiped out by, that blew them up. The nice thing about that was a huge red flag to me. 27 points of damage is going to take people out, right? I thought they could take more than that, to be honest. But 2 PCs just dropped with 27 hit points. Okay, well now I immediately started thinking, because I figured we were still going into the big boss fight, okay, I have to recalibrate some of the damage and stuff that the Gulfius tree does and whatnot, because I had amped that up fairly significantly, right? Okay, well, obviously there were some options for chat to help ameliorate that, but little DM brain is ticking, well, I might have to drop it back even further, and chat might not even get to that donation level to trip that thing off. So that was an encounter that was, I thought beneficial. It brought them back into focus. Oh God, this is really dangerous, you guys. Amy making those intelligence checks had some great opportunities to learn more about the layout of the place. I thought Gaurav's character having that gate portal detection ability was well utilized, and that paid off. I think that sets up for some further interesting applications down the road in the campaign. That's great. And then we went back to the study, the hunting shack, whatever you want to call it. And I thought that was fairly interesting. I want to point out a piece of DMing technique here that I think is valuable, that was applied last night. First of all, obviously there's no write-up for the shack, and I did not have one. I just knew that I was going to take the books that were inside of the library encounter that I had written up and put them inside this study shack thing, right? I thought it was very kind of evocative, where there's this little shack in the middle of this garden and there's this weird stand of white maples in the back, right? I liked that. But Havana says, I check for traps. She rolled high. I don't even remember what it was. I don't remember if she critted it out or what happened. She rolled high. There's no write-up. There was a book inside that was supposed to be trapped, but I already put that trap on the Grove. I don't want to put too many traps on there. But players want to be successful. and they don't want their success to go to waste. So when she rolls a 24 or whatever to detect traps on this hunting shack, guess what? Yeah, it's trapped. It's trapped with maybe like one of the most pedestrian traps that you can find. Yeah, the doorknob has this light coating of contact poison on it. Well, that's easily diffused. That's easily avoided. And they did it by kicking the door in. Good. That was a success that didn't cost me anything as the DM, but was rewarding for the players. If there's no reason for them not to find something, which this seems counterintuitive, but if there's no reason for them not to find something, have them find something. Your job is to make the world more interesting, not less. Your job is to make them feel more competent. Because there's so many other things that you do to try and stress or test their competency. That when they excel at something, why not? Go ahead, give them just a little bit of, give them a little treat. That's what that was. And I don't feel like that sort of technique is patronizing. I mean, you could present it in a way that might come across as patronizing. You have to be able to sell, like, oh yeah, here's what you find, right? So you can't be like, well, actually, it turns out that, yeah, it was really poisoned, yeah. Okay? So you do have to become a very languid salesman and be able to tell them believably that, oh yeah, there was a trap on there. Good, you found, it's got a coating of contact poison. What do you want to do? We want to kick the door down. Good, great. Roll 14. It's a rusty old shack. You kick it in. Big deal. Great. Good job. So I think that's important, right? Like, I saw that as a moment where I could hand the players a free success after having like completely like walloped them and forced them to use a short rest. I could hand them a success for a good die roll. Now, if they rolled like an 8, and you'd be like, "Oh yeah, you found this trap on the door," they'd be like, "I rolled an 8." They're not expecting to achieve success. But there's so many times where they search and they don't find something that you have to make it worth their while when they make an ability check like a search. That you can give them a detail to find, right? They found the books. I loved that. I loved that bird book. I had written that up. That was not improvised. I thought it was great. I thought the way she found it was interesting. Again, that was a situation where she rolled high and she found it. Now, in my notes, you basically can kind of just find it, right? But they weren't searching the room that much. We had sort of a split focus where Amy's character is doing all this like psychic outreach stuff while the rest of the party is trying to deal with the actual material world. And so that gets a little bit, that was a little split focus. That was a little, we're going from one world to another world, one world to another world. And the stuff with Amy's character, I'm way more improvising. I don't have prepared notes on that than I am with, okay, you're going to search this, you find these 2 scrolls and you find this book of weather incidents, and then you search and you find this book of bird calls. So I thought the shack search was a worthy sort of investigation thing. I thought the puzzle that was part of the trees was creepy and appropriately atmospheric, and I thought that worked well. And then we got into the confrontation with Belloc and in the weird garden. And I thought that went all right. I mean, I think Gregory being transformed into that weird stump creature is interesting and fun. I think Belloc, the character, is interesting. I wish that I had more notes prepared on, or a better grasp on, why are they trying to lure Why are they trying to lure Tack into their lair? Why can't they go get her? What their motivation is? It felt a little Star Warsy, become my apprentice kind of thing. I would like that to have been a little more clear cut. But the good news is we did a timeout on the encounter, and we can come back and through the course of the combat maybe fulfill some of that make that more clear. I had a whole bunch of notes on what was going to happen in that fight and potential ways that that thing could twist and turn and shift, right? But we didn't get there. So we had to leave the session, or we had to leave the combat and put that on hold for next time. So that was fun, actually. That gives me some more time to, number one, adjust some of the enemies that they're going to face, because I think I might have made them a little too tough. And number two, try and build in some, not villain monologuing, but a little more exploration of motivation and methods and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's fine. And then the last thing, in terms of recap here, that I want to talk about is we did just a face-to-face character check-in, which we don't normally, like we've done here in the chat, but which we don't do on the stream, and which is generally a Patreon-only backer thing. But I thought, since we weren't going to be able to finish the fight, and since the internet mostly came back up, it was a good way to deal with that situation. I'm glad we did, because the most important takeaway from that whole thing for me was Havana is not interested in exploring or encountering her character's parents, right? I thought that was very enlightening, because when somebody comes to you with, oh, my character's an orphan, with that sort of backstory, as a DM, that's your go-to, right? Is, oh, okay, well, now I've got this, the missing parents plot hook that I can play around with, and one of them shows up, or maybe the traces of them appear, or whatever it is. And I thought it was incredibly insightful that her character is really built around this identity of, I do my own thing, I don't rely on my parents, I don't care about my parents. And I think she's still finding and defining who her character is, that introducing her parents in any way really does become a distraction and muddies up the picture of, well, wait a minute, who is Avril actually, right? And I don't think, maybe this would be something like down the road when she's more established and she really has this definite opinion of like how she fits in with the party and the world. It might be able to kind of like start kind of chipping away at that with little story hooks or little embellishments, little flourishes of, oh yeah, it turns out your mom was here, somebody knows your mom, or whatever, right? That might be. So that was incredibly helpful to me, because now I know, oh, don't bother with those. The player doesn't want to go there. It actually kind of screws up the party dynamic and the character definition. So just let them be what they are. And like I said, it's so easy as a DM to just and as Macabre Derek points out, like those seem like those are great plot hooks, right? It feels like the player is handing you something. Here, go to town with this. And in this case, that's not what she's trying to do. Like that, it's just a truth about her character. And it's a little on the nose. It's a little distracting to bring up her who her parents are. That's fine, and I agree that having those types of connections make the character part of the greater world. But I think she has such a natural inclination to start trouble. And then also we have this like sort of missing period of time where she went off to Neverwinter, that it's far easier for me to plug her into this lost time in Neverwinter, or to play on the plot hooks of her adopted parents, than it is that I have to screw around with her actual missing parents, wherever they went, whatever they deliberately left. Like, that's been established. Like, they left her behind. They went somewhere. It's not that they were killed in some sort of horrible accident or whatever. I think the other thing too is I think it was interesting that, Gaurav sort of has mixed feelings about his dad passing away. It does, I think, tie him more to the group, and I do think he wants to get vengeance. But it does give him a place to go at the end of this when he goes back to town and has to confront the mayor about his dad's death, right? And again, the whole thing about like Belloc is responsible for that poisoning, right? For killing his dad. That needs to be reinforced. That kind of got dropped, and he said that last night. So I think what we may do is we may just kind of start that whole combat over and keep the initiative order the same, but re-roll all of the attack rolls and all that kind of stuff. Since we only really got to his turn, he made a great point, which is, I would be so mad at this guy. Of course I would want vengeance. So that's another thing that I need to prep for next session is, like, number one, let's get the definition, let's put some definition around the motivation for luring Tack into the Sunless Citadel. But number two, let's make sure we're very clear and very specific about how and why Thawne's father got poisoned by Belloc, or under Belloc's orders. All right, that's the recap. That's our recap. It was frustrating to have to stop the combat mid-session, and thank you all for your understanding if you were tuned in last night. I know it gets to be a late night, and it's not fun to watch kind of the wind get sucked out of the sails there like that, but I do think that it probably turned out for the best, given the circumstances, how the night started, and where we were headed, and how much time we had left and whatnot. I think it'll be much better to have the players know, okay, we're going to sit down and start this fight and see what happens. I do want to show you some of the items that I made, terrain pieces that I made yesterday for this game. So we didn't really have a great view of them. I don't know. I didn't look on the camera that much. We didn't really have a great view of them on. What I'd really love to do with that setup is I'd like to take one of our webcams and I want to perch it just table side right there, point it down so you can get right on the tabletop, and we can kind of cut back and forth between those two cameras. We're still working out the camera setup in the studio. We're trying to get something better so that we can do more camera switching, but like the top end stuff is expensive and the lower end stuff is kind of janky. Yeah, so just to answer your question, will there be a cleaned up version on YouTube? We did give the files. Eric took all of the files home, and he's going to kind of like cut them back together and make one contiguous episode rather than like stop, start, stop, start, start, stop. So yeah, it will be cleaned up. Hopefully he'll also be able to kind of eliminate some of the just like, are we on? Is it still, what's going on? Is it, oh, we're back? Are we back? Oh, okay, hey, we're back. Hopefully we'll be able to edit some of that stuff out too. So there will be, whatever, a continuous 3/4 version on YouTube. All right, let's take a look at some of the stuff that I made for last night. It smells so good. We'll go from easiest to most complicated. How does that sound? All right. The easiest thing that I made, and I didn't set up the overhead cam here today, I'm sorry about that, but so the easiest thing that I made today, or yesterday, were these weird little, as they said, flower butthole things. I don't know how much definition there is in that, but I just, I went to Michael's. They have a whole, just a small section that has clay and Sculpey and stuff in it. So you can get a mold that has different stuff, right? It has leaves. It has, I don't know, it's a little silicone mold like you might put like ice cubes or Jello or something like cookies in. It's a little silicone mold that's fairly detailed, and it's got a bunch of different flowers. I don't know if I have different ones I can lay my hands on. So this is sort of like a sunflower daisy type of thing or whatever. And you just take. So I got this. I got this quick drying clay called DAS, DAS, and it's just basically sort of like a terracotta thing that you work with your hands. And I just peeled off a lump of it and pressed it into the mold, and then peeled it out, and then I hit it with a little tool. I hit it with a little dentist tool to make the little indentation. Partly because I wanted it to look creepy, which apparently that was the that was that was the game changer, as you said. That was the tipping point from it's a flower to it's a weird orifice. I was also thinking, so what I might also do with these things is put that hole in there and then drop like a toothpick or something in there and drop a piece of glue. These didn't come out on the table yesterday. For $2.99 I bought like a lily of the valley type of thing. And what I'd like to do is maybe mount that in there, right? If you make the hole big enough, you hit it with a drop of hot melt glue, it should stand up in there. And these would make little bases, and then it would be a little less like a rectum and a little bit more like a plant growing out of the ground. But let's be honest, I mean, it's kind of creepy Cthulhuid stuff. It's gonna look, players are gonna make butt jokes no matter what. So that was one of the most complicated things. So I got some DAS terracotta like sculpting compound, and honestly, like I started sculpting this stuff at noon. I went until about 2 o'clock, and then it's hot here in LA, so I just left it on the outside in the sun to let it dry, and it did pretty good. It did still smell. It smells a little bit today yet. The next most complicated thing that I made was this portal. So, this was not difficult to do. I went to the section that has like all their wooden toys and stuff, the wooden materials for toys, so the weird popsicle sticks and all that kind of stuff, right? And they had these weird picture frame things. So I took this picture frame thing, I stuck it in a base of the terracotta DOS compound, and let that harden and dry. Just squunched it up a little bit. You know, that makes a terrific kind of weird extra planar gate. It doesn't have to be, you know, I could embellish it more if I want to, but then I just took a marker and drew on it. I mean, I did spend $60 on all of my different stuff. You did not see $60 worth of stuff out there. I still have like some other things. So I did spend money on it, and it's fragile, right? Like, I will throw this stuff out when I'm done using it. But it makes a great effect. It makes the session a little more special. And it didn't take me that long to craft those pieces, right? If you were going to do a bunch of those little flower things, you could crank out, boy, I bet you could crank out 30 or 40 of them in about half an hour or so. So, next most complicated thing that I made, probably these trees. Alright, so these trees, as you may well imagine, are just pipe cleaners that are twisted together. You take, that's 6 pipe cleaners? Yeah, so 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. You twist them all together, bend them up, make a little tree out of them. And then I needed a base, so I just stuffed it into that DOS compound and let it dry. Is it the best base in the world? No, but I was going for some, kind of that organic, like, more of organic feel. Than I could have, I guess, used some washers or something, or figured out a better way to base them. but I had extra terracotta and I was kind of in a hurry. And I wanted to have this weird kind of transition from the tree to the ground to show like, the ground is weird. It's clumpy and unnatural. Does it maybe just look a little too hokey? I don't know. You know, from my perspective, those are minor set dressing pieces of terrain. Like the portal doesn't have to be there, but it's nice to have that indicator. The trees do not have to be there at all. That could just be in your imagination, right? So if they look a little hokey, as long as it doesn't like make the whole thing feel hokey, who cares? I was really trying to budget my time in terms of like how much terrain sculpting I did. So this is the next piece, and this is the bird cage that has Dell inside of it. So the tricky thing about this is that I wanted to hang the bird cage, and this actually did have to be able to like bear weight and stand up, right? So the other thing that they had at Michael's was they have this like armature, this like structural armature. It's just a coil of heavy gauge wire that you can put inside of clay. And so I used that as the base for this pipe cleaner thing, because the problem with a pipe cleaner is you hang something like this on it and it starts to droop. So I've reinforced it with this. Again, you know, the seams show. You could do a lot more work to make sure that the shine wasn't, you know, of the rod wasn't actually like obvious. But I'm not trying to make a perfect piece of terrain. I'm just trying to give the suggestion, and I wanted to have this birdcage actually hang in space. And I had to put some extra terracotta on here as a counterweight so that it would actually counterweight this big arch that we're doing. So keep that in mind. But I thought that worked fairly well, and I don't know, it's an interesting, evocative piece to me. Again, without being given the amount of time actually invested in crafting this stuff and putting it on the table, right? I mean, you could save yourself a bunch of time by buying Dwarven Forge and having a huge Dwarven Forge layout. I considered that. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to spend some time to have something custom. You know, the thing is, if you spend a lot of money for something reusable like Dwarven Forge, you're stuck with whatever the Dwarven Forge pieces are that you buy, however many of them are and whatever they look like, right? With this, I didn't have to craft a lot in order to suggest this otherworldly landscape. And especially when you're dealing with an otherworldly landscape, it's very difficult to find those pieces. You might get lucky at the pet store and find something that goes in an aquarium. You might be able to print some stuff off from the internet if you wanted to use like either buildable terrain or just have something that you print off images that are flat on the battle surface. But I wanted something three-dimensional. I wanted to suggest this weird plane of existence where things are, you know, decidedly different. And for that, I didn't have to spend as much as I did, but I would say, let's see, the terracotta was $12, but then that was half off with a coupon, so it was $7. And that was $1.99, and the pipe cleaners were $1.99. And so what are we up to? That's 11. The birdcage was actually $4. I really struggled buying that thing, but okay. So that's $15. The wire armature was, did I already count that? I think that was $3. So that's 18. And the mold was 6. So this whole, what I put on the table last night, that was $26. Sounds about right. Some of it I'll be able to use again. If I want to use those flower molds again, I can. A lot of it I can't. The pipe cleaners are not getting used again. The terracotta can't be sculpted into something else, right? Oh, this fell off. That's interesting. All right, so here we have I'm just going to be careful with this because I did not build this to be super perfect, right? But here we have the Golthius tree. Let's do a little 3D tour. And as you can probably see, there are a bunch of wires that are going into the main body of this thing to make sure that it stands up, that it wouldn't crunch over. There are a few things that are attached that come off, right? I'm not sure even where this came off from, but oh well. I can probably hit this with some hot melt glue and glue it back on wherever it lives. Find where it lives. Is it the best model I've ever done? No. Could I have used a D&D miniature if I had one on hand? Yes. I don't have immediately on hand. I don't have like a weird treant kind of thing like this. And I wanted to make it kind of like put my own little stamp on it. So I sculpted it. Again, like the arms, I took a piece of that wire armature stuff, rolled the clay into it, and then twisted it into the right spot, right? You'd be surprised how much you can do by just pulling on the clay and getting and taking like I take a dental tool and I poke a hole and I just kind of like hollow that hole out, and that's how I got these things. Same thing on the front. That's how the front here looks a little bit like a hollowed out stump. I don't know how much you can see into that. I should really be on my show and tell camera, but I got under the gun for time today. So I took the dental tool and hollowed that out. Same thing with the face, really. I just popped those in there and hollowed them out. The other advantage to having the week off is I can go and I can paint this if I want to paint it. I can make some changes, make some enhancements, hit it with a little hot melt glue, maybe make it a little bit sturdier or what have you. Figure it out. It did separate a little bit when it heated up and dried out in the sun. That's all right. That's fine. Like it works. It works for what it is, right? The only trick on it is it's a little fragile. So you got to be a little careful with it. This is not what I would consider a beginner's piece. Don't try this and have great expectations for how it's going to work. The clay will start to dry on you as you work with it. So you have to have a pretty good idea of like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And also, the the great advantage is just being satisfied. Man, that looks close enough. That looks like a decent face. All right, well, maybe I put a kind of a weird hobo mustache on it. All right, oh well. What am I going to do? Put it in the box. Let's take it to the game. So, that's actually the most complicated piece, but I forgot there's a couple others in here. I don't know what this is from. Some of these pieces just fall off. That must be from a tree somewhere. Alright, whatever. So this is this is Gregory. And again, now this is maybe a better example of how you can see like there's a hollow stump in the top, and all I did was roll a piece of clay, tear the top off, poke some holes in the top, poke some holes in the face. I did do a cross piece of wire to make sure that these legs, if you will, these branches would be supportive in a different direction, would stay attached to the main body, right? So while it was wet, I ran it in there and then globbed that stuff on. I think, if we painted this or whatever, did a little marker enhancement on it, something. I mean, that's the great thing about that. The other model that I just showed you, I decorated that with a Sharpie, everybody. It was that simple. I think this really looks like a tree. It looks sad. It looks scary. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. Considering, I bet I worked on this 15 minutes, tops, right? It was so simple to do that I had leftover clay and I did a second one. It didn't have a face on it. But like, yeah, let's put another stump out there. This one looks a little weirder. It's very definitely like cruder and not great. But I wanted to kind of suggest that the Golthius tree had other victims. And that was the intent of including that stump. It also honestly gives me the opportunity, if I decide I want to add a mook or a minion or something like that, I can go, oh, well, now this stump comes to life too. Now what are you going to do? So that's our dungeon crafting. That's what I prepared yesterday. I maybe spent as much time at the hobby shop at Michael's picking this stuff out as I did actually making it. I could have spent more, I guess. I would say I was probably at Michael's about an hour and a half, 2 hours round trip, and I worked on it for about three and a half hours total. So I'm not gonna, I don't want to downplay how much work it was. It was the majority of my day yesterday was putting this into some sort of, putting this stuff together. And I did sit down and carve out time for myself to just let's make up stats for the Golthius tree. Let's adjust stats or get the stats together for Belloc, etc., etc., etc. I would love the idea that Gregory would get carved into a toy and become some sort of weird little puppet boy or something like that. That is that is a great idea. I appreciate that. Okay, so just briefly, I want to talk about the best laid plans, like what you can do when your session suddenly takes a left turn and is crashes hard, and whether it's in our case we had the internet die, or it might be in your case somebody can't show up last minute, somebody's kids get sick, they gotta go, or there's a schedule change, or something prevents you, you can see your game grinding to a halt, right? Or, as I said at the top of the stream, maybe you see your party they're not dialed in. They're just not in the mood for whatever is going to happen, and it might be best to just take a break, right? So, a couple things. Like I said, the interesting but risky move would be to run some sort of side quest or flashback sequence. Now, one of the reasons I would suggest that you run a flashback sequence is then you don't have to interrupt the continuity of the game to say, oh, I know you guys are in the middle of this dungeon, but as it turns out, a goblin shows up and he needs help in the city. Can you come and help him, deliver these apples or whatever it is, right? If you run it as a flashback, however, you can say, okay, well, this is going to be a one-off. It doesn't have to be canonical. We can flash back to different versions of your characters that might have different powers. You could do some sort of weird flash forward where you're in the future, whatever the case may be. I've had success before just doing a timeout and not playing and going, okay, just doing sort of a job interview. Where do you see your character? Let's imagine it's 10 years from now. The war is over. You fought bravely. What are some of the consequences? What are some of the things that happened to you? And you can use that as informing you as the DM where that player wants to take their character. Are they a hero? Do they betray somebody? Do they get some sort of signature magic item? Do they gain reputation for a particular deed or a particular skill, etc., etc., etc.? So play around with the idea that if your session comes to a grinding halt, you can do it, or you've got to pull the ripcord on your session, you can do a time jump. You can either time jump back and do really what amounts to a character development session, where we have this fun little side story, or you can flash forward, right, to where you do more of a dreams, hopes, and goals type of exercise. Either one of those are valuable when your players are not zoned in on the game or you can't play the game. It helps them get, it takes pressure off because you know that it's outside the current continuity. If it's a prequel, your character's not going to die because it's a prequel, most likely, right? And if it's in the future, it doesn't matter if they die because it's in the future. It's not happening immediately. So all of that pressure of I don't want to do something risky that jeopardizes my character's health, who cares? In the one hand, in the flashback, it's irrelevant, and in the flash forward, there's no stakes attached. It would be a wonderful exercise for every DM to sit down with their party and go, okay, tell me about the day that your character dies. I think players are so guarded about that. Players think to themselves, they're constantly trying to find ways to survive. How can we beat this encounter? How can we defeat this boss? How can we avoid this trap? How can we avoid taking damage? Their character is so precious that giving them that storytelling opportunity really inverts the standard player outlook for at least a traditional RPG like Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, well, what would be an interesting way to die? And the thing is, nobody's going to come up with, or it's very unlikely that someone will come up with, mm, oh, he trips in the bathroom and he hits his head on the side of the sink and snaps his neck and he dies. Like, it's not going to be like he gets hit by a stagecoach crossing the street or whatever, or whatever. So if you give them those ideas about like, okay, like work on what, if you give them that place to go, well, what would be an interesting way to die? Now all of a sudden it helps inform your creative ability to develop. Well, wait a minute, what situations could I put them in that would feel like that? That would maybe give them that feeling without necessarily telegraphing. This is we're going to have your character. This is your opportunity to sacrifice yourself. But it definitely gives you the some insight into, oh, okay, well, this is what the player considers heroic, and these are the causes that this PC believes in. These are the ideals and beliefs that they want to fulfill and die trying to fulfill. Very interesting. You have other, obviously, you have some other opportunities. You could do a one shot of a different game. Okay, you guys are not into this. Guess what? We're switching to Cobalt Ate My Baby. It's very lightweight. We're gonna have fun. Well, you know what? Somebody run out and grab a 6-pack of beer. Let's have a good time. We're gonna play Fiasco, whatever it is. You can switch to a one-shot of a session. You can also switch to just a board game, right? I will say, like, one of the biggest mistakes that I have made in my gaming career is going, oh, well, everybody couldn't make it. Let's play Talisman. Talisman is fun for the first 2 hours, and then you spend the next 4 hours going, why is this game not over? So think about those. There's so many board games that I have sitting on my shelf that I would love to try. That it's an opportunity to go, hey guys, you know what? Put the dice away. We're gonna play this. And then I think finally it's just fine to do exactly what we did last night, which is not to do a flashback and not to do a flash forward, but go, okay, hey, you know what? Let's we're not getting too far here tonight. Let's just do a quick check-in. It's a great opportunity to sit down and talk to your players about how do you feel like the game is going. And that's always a loaded question. That feels scary to ask, right? How do you think the game is going? That's tough, right? Because that puts them in the position of judging you. But if you ask it the way we asked it last night, how do you feel about your character development? Like, what's happening with your character, where they're going, what would you like to see differently, what would be a step too far? Do you care about your character's parents or whatever plot hooks you're curious about? To ask it in that way will give you an idea of how is the game going. And then along with your observation of, oh, we had a big fight and it bogged down and everybody sort of just like all their energy sucked out and they weren't interested in what was going on. Versus we had this role-playing session where they really got into it. Okay. You combine those things, what you've learned from the players directly, and then what you've observed about them, sitting at the table running the game without asking them, somewhat indirectly, that will help you craft your sessions better, right? That will help you create the experience that they're craving. And I don't often do that, but I'm glad that we did it last night, and I thought it was valuable. And I think that, I don't know that you have to plan a whole session around it, but we did it for half an hour or 45 minutes. It's not a bad idea that in that time when you're waiting for pizza, maybe when you're waiting for somebody to show up, but like food delivery is a clutch thing where we're sitting around and we're waiting, or one person is leveling up their character and you're not really ready to give the recap and get everybody back into the game. When you have that half an hour or 45 minutes at the beginning of your session where everybody's kind of sitting around and bullshitting, occasionally use that as an opportunity to do a quick check-in. So where do you think this is going with your character? Like, do they care about whether they ever find their parents or encounter their parents? Do they care that their dad was poisoned? Does it like, where does that lead them? Where do you think that could go? You know, use that opportunity before the game, because after the game, I'll tell you, it can get tricky unless you have to cancel in the middle, which is sort of essentially what we did, right? After the game, there's a lot of people who are like, I'm tired, I want to go home. My wife has texted me like 55 times. I got to go walk the dog. I got work in the morning. I got to do a big road trip. I got to pack for later on this week. Da, da, da. Like, at the end of the session is not a great time to bring that sort of thing up. Especially because at the end of the session, players are more likely to be reflective on what just happened, as opposed to have a more open and aspirational outlook in terms of, well, let's see, here's where I think this could be going, right? At the beginning of the session, now the world of possibilities lays before them, whereas at the end of the session, they're more inclined to go, well, based on what just happened, I don't know if I really like the idea that, right? So be careful of using that exercise at an inopportune time, or at a time where everybody's just flagging in terms of energy, not necessarily in terms of focus, right? And that's really what we've been talking about. So that's kind of what that's my advice for the best laid plans when your session goes off the rails and you just really can't recover. Obviously, some of it is obvious, but I think it is helpful, and it takes a lot of pressure off, where people know I can talk about my character without having to roll dice, without having to determine whether this actually happens or not. I can blue sky about what the death of my character might look like. I can openly discuss, here's some themes that I'm sensing are important to my character, in a broad brush way that does not involve like, oh, well, I failed my charisma check, I guess I don't convince you that you should give me a +1 longsword, whatever it is. So that's what we've got. If anybody has any quick questions, I will tackle them briefly, but that sort of brings us to the end of our time today. If you have something, pop it up in the chat. I do want to give you a heads up. I will not be streaming since Tuesday is the 4th of July. Here in the U.S., that's a holiday for everyone, and I'm not going to do DM prep on Tuesday. So Disorganized Play will be off on Tuesday, and I'll be back at my game Wednesday night as per usual. We do have Monday night. We have the Yellow King Kickstarter. Mr. David Crennan is going to be doing a preview / demo / playthrough of the Yellow King RPG that Robin Laws just launched on Kickstarter. You can go over to Kickstarter and check that out. Look for the Yellow King RPG. We're going to be showcasing that on Monday. It doesn't look like anybody is popping anything in the chat, so there's no questions. That's fine. That's all right. Not every day is a great day for advice. And I think we're all kind of gearing up for our long weekend, so that's cool. Yeah, we will. I know I had teased last night that maybe Liz Bauman was going to come on, and we'd have a little Q&A, but I don't think that's going to happen. Since the 4th is a holiday, I wouldn't want to try and make that happen. That seems a little ridiculous. So that's fine. Everybody go out and enjoy their 4th. Here's what we've got for the rest of the day. So tonight, Star Wars. Speaking of Mr. David Crennan, Never Tell Me the Odds. Our Edge of the Empire Star Wars Fantasy Flight game is tonight at 8 o'clock. That is the season finale of that particular little story arc. So check it out and see if our players survive the onslaught of hundreds of Hutt goons. It remains to be seen. Friday night, Mr. West Otis is back in the saddle with Black Bag Vikings, our weird sort of pseudo-medieval Call of Cthulhu game. Check that out. It's always good to tune in for the creepy icky yuck with Mr. West Otis and his magical traveling bag of sounds. Then Saturday and Sunday, you are left to your own devices. You can catch up on my show on Disorganized Play. You can catch up on that here on YouTube. I think we're kind of getting caught up on episodes. We're a little bit behind on uploading things. We just did a big dump to catch up. Let's see what we're up to here on the latest uploads. So, saving throw show. 704 videos, you guys. Videos. I just want to check out the channel here and see what we've got. Latest upload was Disorganized Play from Tuesday. Chronicles of Darkness was on Monday, it looks like, if you missed our RPG Exploration Society. And we don't have anything up from the marathon. You can always go back and watch the marathon on the VOD on Twitch. So check that out as well. You know, again, if you did not tune in and watch the Carthoon game or my Marvel Superheroes game, those were fantastic. Everything else was super cool too, but those are the ones that I directly participated in, and so that's the buzz there. So that's the deal with that. Otherwise. Yeah, so that's the buzz. Have a great long holiday weekend. Monday night, like I said, you can check out the Yellow King RPG Exploration Society with David Crennan and whatnot. That's super cool. But other than that, that's our schedule. I'm looking forward to actually diving back in next week. I think it will be very instructive. Not so much instructive. It will be very useful to have some time to refine some of the things that I handed out or that I put together, refine some of the way the encounter is structured, refine some of the other elements that I'm going to drop into the encounter, and then kind of hit the ground running. I think if you go back and watch the VOD, everybody was just a little scattered last night when we sat down. I don't think the session was wasted, but I do appreciate the fact that technical issues actually intervened to keep us from kind of riding it out, because I think we're going to have a lot better experience diving into it next Wednesday. All right. Eric, thanks so much for your diligent work and getting all of our stuff up onto the YouTubes. Very much appreciated. FQ, I want to thank you for, as always, your diligent hosting duties here. I want to thank everybody who chimed in today. There's some great ideas. Always helpful insight coming from the chat. And also, if you're not a Patreon backer, I want to emphasize it's the last day of the month tomorrow. It is a great time before pledges get charged to jump in to our Patreon, and I have maps for you, I have handouts for you, I have my tools like the plot vice that I put together on Tuesday, which you could have tuned in and watched how I used that brand new tool, and then how some of it got applied. It did definitely help me develop my encounters, but it is a great time to pledge on our Patreon and get access to those materials. It doesn't cost much for you to get in. We also have a Patreon-only fireside chat where we bring in casts from the different shows and do a talk. We're always looking at refining our goals. If you have a suggestion for Dom, we're happy to field it and look at like, oh, what could be the next thing. Right now, we're looking at adding a second fireside chat, but I think there's some other opportunities there as well. That's all I've got for you. I've got to go get my lineup for Gamehole Con put together. I am running several things at Gamehole Con. I have to decide exactly what they are so that if you're planning to come to Gamehole Con and you want to game with me, you have something to sign up for, because the signups for that go up very soon. I believe in the next, I don't know, next week or so, after the 4th of July holiday, those things start getting opened up. So keep that in mind. If you're inclined to join a con, and I will be at 2 cons the remainder of this, well, I will be appearing as Dungeon Bastard at 2 cons this year. I will be at Gen Con, and I will be at Gamehole Con. I'm also planning to go to Big Bad Con in Oakland, but I'm going there as a player. I don't think I'm going to be running anything. So if you're inclined to try and get in on a Dungeon Bastard game, I'm going to be doing some DMing workshops, some hands-on DMing workshops at Gamehole Con and whatnot. Go check those. Go check out Gamehole Con. It's a great con. If you're an old school D&D player, kind of no matter what your fancy is, they have a terrific lineup of guests, and it's really a fun con. Even though it's in Wisconsin in the middle of November and it's named Gamehole Con, it's actually a terrific event, and there's going to be basically the whole crew of wizards is going to be there, etc. Gen Con is Gen Con. I'll be there hosting Nazcrag, and that's the buzz on my appearances. So join our Patreon. Go sign up for or take a look at Gamehole Con. I think my events are probably going to sell it pretty quickly, but go take a look at Gamehole Con, and if not, maybe I'll hopefully see you at Gen Con. Until next time, hey, let's dungeon! 126.3 in a row. Oh, I'm getting so good at clicking that button, you guys. Really good. Hey, have a great weekend. Have a great holiday.